What would you do if you had an extra 1 or 2 hours of extra time every week? What would you do if you had an extra 1 or 2 hours every day? Would that be useful to you? Well, what if I told you that running a time audit can actually get you that time? That's what I want to talk about today. So let's get to it. Resourceful Designer, episode 330. Take back your time with a time audit.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, whose favorite number is 13, Mark Decote.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I've always been, I think it's called a contrarian, maybe. I don't know if that's the word or not. But it seems to me that throughout my life, anytime that people got on the bandwagon for something, I would always pick the opposite. For example, I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. That's a hockey team, if you're not aware. It's an NHL hockey team. But I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan because all my friends were Montreal Canadiens fans, and I decided I wanted to be different. When I was young, I just picked randomly the Toronto Maple Leafs, and all my life I've been rooting for them. Well, the same thing goes for numbers. Everybody, for some strange reason, has a favorite number, and I know growing up, most people it was like number 3 or number 7. But number 13 was always the unlucky or the bad number, the evil number. And for some reason, that just drew me to it. And I always said that 13 was my favorite or lucky number. I don't know why. It hasn't helped me in any way in my life, but if anybody was to ask me what's my favorite number, 13 is the first thing that pops into my head. So, I don't know. Anyways, as I said in the intro, today's episode is about time audits. I want to talk about what they are, how to run them, and what the benefit of it is. But the whole point, I'll give you this right up front, the whole point of a time audit is to figure out where you're wasting time during your day. And whether you're conscious of it or not, you are wasting time. We all are. And the one thing about time we know is that it's the only true non-renewable resource. Once time passes, you are never getting it back. And there is a finite amount of it. There are only 24 hours in a day, and you can't spend all 24 hours working, or, well, I suppose you can, but it wouldn't be very healthy. So there is only a fixed number every day that you can spend working. Now, I don't want this episode to turn into a deathbed looking back and thinking, oh, I wish I would have spent my time this way or that way, or I wish I had spent more time doing this or less time doing that. No, that's a completely different topic for a completely different podcast. But I do think that just during your regular work day, whether you work full-time like I do, or if you just do part-time or freelance from time to time, there are ways where you can get back some time or shift some time for better use. Because if you think about your day, I'm sure there's many, many areas where you're actually wasting time or where you can improve your time. Take meetings, for example. You know that funny t-shirt or email that goes around that says, this meeting could have been an email? Well, the reason that's funny is because oftentimes it's true. Most meetings are not as productive as people think they are. Oftentimes, a 30-minute meeting could have easily been done in 10 minutes, or could have easily been done in an email, as that joke goes. I don't know about you, but I've been in many meetings over my life where at the end of the meeting, I'm thinking we didn't accomplish anything, or there was really no new information there, or what new information was given could have been sent out in 1 or 2 paragraphs in an email. So meetings is one thing where you can easily cut back time. Now, I'll tell you something. With my podcast branding business, I have it so that anytime somebody places an order with me, they get an email asking them to schedule a Zoom meeting with me. I insist on having a Zoom call with every single client that comes my way. I want to talk to them. I want to get to know them so I can incorporate their personality into the design. Now, when I first started, I would just send out an email saying, the next step in the process is to have a Zoom meeting with me. Here's my calendar. Please book a time that's convenient for you. And that was great. But what I found was some of these meetings were running, 45 minutes, an hour, because yes, I like to talk, which is evident. I mean, I'm making a podcast right now, but I enjoy talking with people. And sometimes, the conversation about, say, they wanted a logo design, the conversation may only take a few minutes as we're discussing the logo or whatever. And then we would talk about other things around their business, around their brand. And yes, building client relationship is good. But all that time was something that I could have been putting to better use elsewhere. So I made a simple change. I changed my email from book a time with me to book a 15-minute Zoom call with me. And now when clients get on the meeting, they're conscious that there's a 15-minute time limit. Now, if I want to talk longer, that's my prerogative. I can go longer. I can go 20. I can go 30 minutes. I can go an hour if I want. But since I made that change, most of my clients will look at the time and go, oh, the 15 minutes are almost up, and they'll kind of wrap up the thing. And I'm grateful for that, because if there isn't anything else to talk about, we can end the meeting after 15 minutes. And then I can get back to work. I can use that time for something else as opposed to continuing to talk. Because if there's no limit, I know myself. I will keep talking. Now, social media, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is another time killer. Whether you're perusing Facebook, scrolling through TikToks, watching Instagram Reels, or trying to keep up on the latest on YouTube. I'm not discounting the fun and the entertaining aspect of these platforms, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that there is a lot of time wasted on these platforms. So you need to be conscious of how much time you spend during your working hours perusing these things that are not work-related. Because the one thing about social media platforms, and they're all the same when it comes to this, their goal is to keep you on the platform. If you go to YouTube to look up a tutorial on how to do something specific in Photoshop, once you find that and you start watching the video, it's going to feed you all these other videos. It's like, oh, you watch this one? Well, here's another one you may be interested in. Maybe it's a similar tutorial on how to do the same thing. And you may say, well, maybe I want to watch that one in case the next person says something different. Or maybe it'll be a different tutorial on doing something different in Photoshop. And you go, oh, that looks really interesting. It's only 7 minutes long. What's the harm? I'll watch it, even though it's not something you need to know right now. Social media is geared that way. TikTok is the worst because the videos are so short that you feel like, oh, that was really fun. I'll just scroll on to the next one. I'll just scroll on to the next one. I'll just scroll on to the next one. I'll just scroll on to the next one, and so on, and so on, and so on. Next thing you know, an hour has gone by, and you're saying, like, how did that just happen? So be very conscious with social media. Now, I talked about YouTube, and I don't know about you, but I subscribe to a lot of channels that I don't watch anymore. And for some reason, I don't remember the last time I actually unsubscribed from a channel on YouTube, and I really should. Some of these channels are things that I subscribed to years ago, and it may be that they had a couple of great videos and I really liked them, so I subscribed to them. But it's the type of thing that, either I haven't been paying attention to them or watching them, or I don't really need to see them. Like, they're funny, meme type things or whatever. They're there for pure entertainment. And whether I see one or never see one again doesn't really make much difference. The same goes for like email lists. I'm subscribed to a bunch of email lists. It's worse when you go to a store and you buy something and they ask for your email and then you start every day getting an email from the store. Unsubscribe from those things because they take time. Even just receiving an email and deleting it takes time. So if you're not interested in going to that store on a regular basis, delete their emails. Unsubscribe from those YouTube channels, even podcasts. Every once in a while, I'll look at my podcast list because I'm subscribed to probably 40 different podcasts, if not more. And every once in a while, I'll look through and say, okay, do I really need to still be subscribed to this podcast? And in some cases, I'll say no, and I'll just unsubscribe. Like, I feel like I'm not going to miss out on anything if I don't hear any more episodes. So I want you to do that, even if it's this podcast. Although if you are listening to this right now, then chances are you still listen to my podcast, which I hope you won't want to unsubscribe. But if you find Resourceful Designer is just a waste of your time, unsubscribe. I don't want to be part of the problem. But if you find you're getting value, then stick with me. What about network events? Now, I'm not discounting networking. I think networking is very important. It's a great way to grow your business. But does every network event need to be attended? I know my local Chamber of Commerce has a pub night. I think they do it once per month. And that's the type of thing where some people, they go every single month. Yes, it's networking, but if it's the same people all the time, you're just meeting the same people over and over. That after a while, that's no longer networking. They know who you are. They know what you can do. You know who they are. You know what they can do. Now it's just getting together for the fun of it, which is great, but that's time you can spend doing other things. So instead of going every month, maybe go every other month or every 3 months, just to keep, your name refreshed in their minds. But you don't have to attend every single networking event, especially if it's something that repeats over and over. And think about your other commitments as well. I used to be on the board of directors for our local division or chapter of Habitat for Humanity. And I loved it. I was on for a couple of years. But after a while, I decided that, I want that time back, because not only was I going to regular meetings, but there was all sorts of events planned around town, fundraising events, all sorts of unravelings and things for Habitat. And after a while, I wanted that time back, especially when my kids were at the age where they were heavily into sports and stuff like that. So I decided that instead of devoting my time to Habitat, which I had already been doing for a few years, I decided it was time to step away and get that time back so I can spend it with my family. Webinars are another culprit. I don't know about you, but I hate signing up for a webinar. You get on at the designated time, and then they spend the first 10 minutes going through. It's like, can you hear me okay? Is this set up right? Oh, look, we have Jan from Nova Scotia. Oh, here's Richard from New York. We have Gary from Australia, Sarah from Anaheim, Liam from London, and so forth and so forth. Yeah, okay, it's nice to see all these people, but they take, 10 minutes while you're sitting there waiting for them to actually get started with the stuff you want to actually see. And then who knows, maybe they'll have some technical difficulties and that. Any webinar, I always sign up and then I wait for the replay. Because with the replay, you can skip all that boring stuff. And chances are, depending on the platform, I can also watch the replay at a faster speed. Now, I'll just tell you another little thing. I do that with podcasts and on YouTube. With podcasts, I now listen to my podcasts at 2x speed. Now, I know to some people that's like, they don't understand. My wife, if she hears the 2x podcast, she has no idea what they're saying. She doesn't know how I can listen to it. But I've built up to that over time. I started off listening at 1, like at regular time, and then I went up to 1.25. And when I got used to it, I went up to 1.5. And it took me a while. Once I got used to 1.5, I went to 1.75. And once I got used to that, now I'm up to 2x. And it's just conditioning your brain. Now, when I listen at 2x, everybody sounds normal to me. It doesn't sound fast to me. It sounds normal. Actually, when I listen to a podcast at normal speed, it sounds to me like everybody is talking so slow. But that's just me. So I save time because now I can listen to an hour-long podcast in 30 minutes. A 20-minute podcast, I get done it in 10 minutes. And I do the same thing with YouTube. On YouTube, if you click the little sprocket, you can increase the playback speed. So anytime I watch something on YouTube, I'll increase it to not necessarily 2x because the video would go too fast, but I'll listen at 1.5 speed or sometimes 1.25, depending. If it's something I really need to get the information out, I'll slow it down a little bit to 1.25. But I'll listen to it a little bit faster just to save the time. But getting back to webinars, that's one of the reasons why I wait for the recording, because if there's a chance that I can watch it at a faster speed or just skipping through, I want to skip through all the introduction. I want to skip through all the boring parts and get to what I really want. And sure, I may miss out on the opportunity to participate in the Q&A at the end of the webinar, but I don't know of a single person that gives a webinar that wouldn't answer a question if you emailed them after the fact and say, sorry, I wasn't able to attend the live webinar. I watched the replay and I have a question about this. I guarantee you will get your question answered. So being live on the webinar, just so you can ask some questions, is a waste of time, in my opinion. I'd much rather watch it afterwards where I can scroll through it, skip the unimportant parts, watch it faster, and be done with it. And the last one I want to talk about is regular check-in meetings. This is something I've always hated. You get this big project, a project that may last a couple of months. You're doing a lot of stuff for a client, and they insist on meeting, every Friday at 10 a.m. to discuss where the project stands. To me, this is a waste of time. You can easily send them an email telling them what you're up to, what progress has been made. There's no reason to have to get on to a 10, 15, 20-minute meeting every week just to go over this stuff. It's a waste of time. The time that you spend over the course of the entire project meeting and discussing this stuff could have been time to finish the project faster if you would have devoted it to that instead of a meeting. So anyways, all of this to say that there is a lot of things throughout your day that take up time that you could cut back in order to get time back from it. And that's where a time audit comes in. So what exactly is a time audit? Well, a time audit is a way for you to take note of how you spend your days, what you're doing, how much time you spend on them, and then collecting that data for analysis at the end and figuring out how to improve, how to save time. So I looked up many different ways, but I think the best way to do a time audit from all my research is get a pencil and paper and keep track of the things you do. Now, everywhere says that you should set a timer. Now, you could use a tool like I found Toggl at Toggl is TOGGL.com. Toggl Track is the software. They have a free plan that, from what I can tell, is exactly what you need. Like, you don't need the paid plan, but it's a time tracker that'll help you keep track of different things. So you can use something like that, but just something like a piece of paper and a pencil will work just as well. Now, what you do is you set a timer. Now, different places that talk about time audits say that you can do it from 15-minute timer to 30-minute timer to 1-hour timer or more. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a 15 or even a 30-minute timer going off throughout the day for several days, because a time audit is not just a one day. You should be doing this for several days. Some people say do it across an entire week. Some people say you should do it maybe every other day for a couple of weeks. But what you need is data from multiple days. But I wouldn't want a timer going off every 15 or 30 minutes. 1 hour is already enough. Like, that's still going to be frequent enough, but that's what I would do. So you set a timer to go off every hour. And every time the timer rings, you have your sheet of paper or your app or wherever you're tracking, you write down what you're in the middle of doing. You take 15, 20 seconds and you write down what you're doing. If you want, you can write down what you were doing beforehand, but you write down at the time the timer goes off, this is what you're doing. So if you were in the middle of scrolling Facebook because you had just finished your project and you had a few minutes, so you're scrolling Facebook and the timer goes off, you write down that you were scrolling Facebook. You could write down, after that you just finished this other project, and that's fine. But at the time of the timer ran off, you were scrolling Facebook. And then you do this over several days. As I said, you can do it every other day. You can do it every 5 days in a row, but you want several days worth of data. And at the end of this time, you take all of these notes every time the timer rang and you wrote down what you were doing, and then you analyze this information. Now, some people say you should use what's called the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a way of analyzing. And the way this works is, let me try to visualize this for you. You have 4 squares, 2 on the top and 2 below. So it's basically a grid of 4 squares. The 2 columns, the first column is urgent things. The second column is not urgent things. Now, the first row across is important things, and this bottom row is not important things. So you have 4 quadrants. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at all the items that you marked down when the timer rang, and you're going to put them into one of these 4 quadrants. So you have important and urgent, important but not urgent, not important but urgent, and not important and not urgent. So you divide everything up. Then you can look at this and say, okay, I have these tasks that are urgent and they're important. Those are the things I really need to do. Those are important. Those are not a waste of time. But then you have the important things that are not urgent. This could be, say, email, checking your email. It's important that you check your email, but it's not necessarily urgent. Myself, I usually check my email twice per day, once around lunchtime and once at the end of the day. I like it this way because in the morning, I could sit down and get to work. I don't have to worry about checking emails or what might happen there. If I have it in my head that today I want to work on this project, I sit down in the morning and I start working on that project. At noon, when I'm about ready to get up for lunch, I'll open up my email and I'll have a look at what's there and if anything came in. If something urgent came in my opinion, all my clients have my phone number. If there's something very urgent, they'll call me. If they send it to me into an email, it's not that urgent. Even if they say it's urgent, if they took the time to email instead of calling, it's not that urgent. So to me, checking the email is something that's important to do, but it's not urgent. So it falls into that category. Then there's the not important, but urgent. That could be something like updating the plugins on a website. Maybe there's some sort of security reason that there was an upgrade or an update to a plugin. Well, that may be urgent for a security point of view, but in my mind, it's not that important. Now, okay, that one may be, take that with a grain of salt. It's not that important. It's not that important to me, put it that way. There's other things I would much rather be doing than updating plugins. So anything that is urgent, that needs to be done like that, but it's not that important, at least as far as I'm concerned, that's the sort of thing that you can delegate, which is exactly what I do. I have a VA who updates my client websites for me because I know it has to be done, especially if there's a security vulnerability, but it's not that important enough for me to have to do it myself. And then the last box is the not urgent, not important. And anything that falls in this box, say like scrolling Facebook, it's not really that important that you scroll Facebook and it's not something that's urgent, then that's something that you can look at and say, okay, how can I eliminate this from my day? If it's not urgent or not important, then it's something I don't need to be doing. And I could use that time for better use. So that's one way, the Eisenhower Matrix. Now, there is another way that some people do, and it's a lot easier, and it's just two things. You look at your list and you say, okay, is this something that is a priority or is it a time waster? That's it. You have two things. You put them in two columns. The things on your list that are priorities, things that you need to get done, things that help you move forward, that help you achieve your goals and your objectives. Or is it a time waster? Is it something that you're doing that really is unproductive, that's blocking you or preventing you from getting to the high priorities? And then you look at these two, especially the high priorities, especially the time wasters, and you decide, are there any of these that you can actually eliminate from your day? Now, the high priority ones, you look at them and you say, okay, what order do I need to put these in? If I'm going to be doing these every single day or on a regular basis, how important are them? So I've got all these things that are priorities, but are some of them more of a priority or a higher priority than others? And you figure those out. And those are the things you should be concentrating on every day. The time wasters are the ones that you can say, these I can do if I have the time and I could fill it in. But a lot of those time wasters should be things that you can just eliminate altogether and get that time back. So now those time wasters are gone and you can use that time for the high priority items. So that's kind of the very rough idea on a time audit. You take a look at what you're doing. That's the audit part. You look over your time. You keep set an alarm. You mark down what you're doing every time the alarm goes off. And then at the end of the week or end of a certain period of time, you collate that data to find out how much of the things you were doing were priority items or important or urgent. And then you figure out what things were time wasters or not urgent or not important. And you redistribute your time to better achieve your goals and to reach whatever targets you have. And then you can set your schedule according to that. Now, the trick is keeping consistent. It's very easy to say, well, I'm going to eliminate Facebook, but then, who knows? It may creep in. Or it's very easy to say that, I'm not going to look at YouTube, but when you have to go look at a video, they feed you a lot of other stuff that you just want to look at. So you have to have the discipline to say, okay, no, I'm not going to look at that now. Maybe you can save it to look at later. YouTube has a save for later feature. Maybe you can do that. Or you just stick it in a tab and close it and don't watch it now. But the idea is, if you do this correctly, you may be able to free up an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours throughout your day that you can put to better use. Now, what do you do with that extra time? If you do manage to free up some time, whether it's so much time per day or even during a week, if you have a couple of hours a week, what do you do with that extra time? Well, my suggestion is your first priority should be yourself. You should put that time towards improving your health. The healthier you are, the more productive you're going to be. The more motivation you will have. The more creativity you will have. So if you do have an extra hour, an extra 2, even if it's just per week and not per day, if you have a gym membership, maybe take that time and go to the gym. If you have a dog, take your dog out for a walk. If not, just do some exercise yourself. Maybe do a little bit of meal prep so that instead of eating junk food on a regular basis, you can actually have some good meals ready to go. The first thing you should do with your free time or extra time is devote that time to health improvements for yourself. Now, the second thing I would suggest is spend that time with your family. I know that as a father of 2 kids, that time is fleeting. My kids are now 27 and 24 years old, and I miss the times where they were home and I was doing stuff with them. So I would suggest that if you find yourself with an extra hour a day or an extra hour per week, if you can, spend that time with your kids, because before you know it, they will be grown up and gone and you will miss that time you spend with them. And if you don't have kids, spend that time with your spouse, or if you're still at home with your siblings or your parents or whatever. Find family and friends is an important thing to spend that time with. After that, after your health and after you're spending time with family and friends, then you can work on things like networking, which is always good. You should always be networking, grow your business, get more information out there, get people to know you, because once again, it's not who you know that'll grow your business, it's who knows you. And you do that by getting your name out there. So if you do have extra time, now I know this is kind of funny that I talked about earlier how you can save time by not going to networking events, but maybe not go to the same one over and over. But if they're new network events, spend some time doing that. And lastly, use the time to work on your own business. Improve your website, improve your marketing material, improve your whole brand overall. Improve yourself, do some self-learning, learn some new skills, learn some new lessons, become a better business person, whatever. Devote that time to yourself. And lastly, of course, if you have a project you're working on, you can devote that time to the project. But I don't know. I'm of the opinion that if you get any extra time during your week, that time should be, you should do something selfish with it. Improve your health, spend it with family, network to grow your business, work on your own stuff, and devote that extra time back to client work only as a last resort. That's just my opinion, because even though clients are important, without all of the other stuff I mentioned, you're not going to have a business. So I hope this made sense. The whole point of it is just to think about things. As I'm recording this is the first week of 2024. This will be the very first episode of 2024. And the beginning of the year is the perfect time to take stock of your situation. And a time audit is the perfect tool to figure out, how are you spending your time? What are you doing throughout your day? And is there anything there that maybe you shouldn't be doing or that you can cut back on in order to give yourself more time? Because there's no way to get extra time during the day, but those hours can be shifted from one thing to the other. And if you can figure that out, you will be much more productive. You will feel much better. You can probably be more creative and just overall be much happier. And then when the work day is over, then you can take some time if you want, if you have it available, to look at those YouTube videos, to scroll through TikToks, but not during your work day. That time should be devoted to work. So anyways, I hope you got some value out of this. I know I've already started doing my time audit. I'm going to figure out some things. I already know right off the bat that I have certain things during my normal week over the past several months that I want to get rid of and spend that time doing some other things, because I have other plans that right now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to fit them into my schedule. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm doing a time audit to figure out what to eliminate so that I could introduce some other things into my schedule. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Now, if you enjoyed this topic and you want to talk more about this with me and some other like-minded designer, why don't you consider joining the Resourceful Designer community? Not only do you have a great bunch of designers who are very dedicated to growing their business, you also have access to me. I consider myself just a regular guy, but a lot of people have told me that my podcast and the information I share has really helped them. And I know a lot of people in the community join because of me. Now, that's very humbling from my point of view, but maybe that's what you're looking for. Somebody like me to talk about your business. Now, the benefit is you get everybody else in the community, but I'm in there on a daily basis communicating with everybody. This is not one of those communities where the founder starts off at the beginning, everything's fine, but then they step back and let everybody else run it and they're not, barely in it anymore. I'm in the community consistently, and I try to answer every question anybody asks. So if you want full access to me that way, then why don't you consider joining the Resourceful Designer community at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. Maybe that could be something new you try for 2024 to help improve your business. Anyways, that's it for me. I do wish you the best year that you've had to date. I don't know what sort of resolutions you've set or if you have set resolution. I'm not a big resolution. I have some ideas of what I want to do, but I didn't actually set resolutions per se. But I do have goals, and I just hope that whatever you're planning for this year, that you do achieve them. And as I mentioned, if you need help or you need advice, you need guidance, there's lots of us, including myself, in the Resourceful Designer community that can help you. But that's it for this episode. Until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.